What's going on, guys? So today's video is going to be really interesting because we're comparing two vehicles that are very similar in some ways and very different in other ways. On the right, you have my wife's 2019 Ford Expedition in Platinum trim, and on the left, you have the all-new 2022 GMC Yukon in the Denali trim. So these are both top-end trims. You can kind of see a bit of similarities between how they do their grills on these higher-end trims, but because my wife's vehicle is 3 years older than the current Denali, but it's really only a year's difference in terms of the interior and the design of the vehicle. But because my wife's vehicle is 3 years older than the Denali, and this is a brand new Denali, brand new model that's come out, you're gonna see some differences in terms of execution and technology in the Denali that weren't available on my wife's 2019 Expedition when we got it. However, disclaimer, the 2022 Expedition has a lot of really crazy advancements that they've integrated in. We'll talk a little bit about those in a second. Hang tight, I'll be right back. So real quickly, let's talk about some of the changes the Ford Expedition has for 2022, which make it more of a head-to-head competitor against the new 2022 Denali. The 2022 Expedition is going to have either a 12-inch standard screen, which is huge, or an optional 15.5-inch infotainment screen, which, I mean, essentially makes it look like a Tesla. It's just insane how large the new navigation screen is in the 2022 Ford Expedition. Now again, this is my wife's 2019 Ford Expedition, and this is essentially the same vehicle all the way up to 2021. So 2022 for both the Yukon Denali and the Ford Expedition are big changes, and right now we're only comparing my wife's current vehicle. The point of today's video is to talk about some of the differences because my wife is actively considering getting a vehicle like this, possibly getting a new Expedition, or, you know, just a new SUV in general. And this is certainly a vehicle, now that we've had some time to spend it, that she is considering. And my wife has an entire video talking about the differences and her opinions on the two vehicles. And I think it's a very important video to watch if you're considering getting one of these vehicles for your family, mainly because, you know, when you have a 2019 Expedition Platinum, really what could another manufacturer do to kind of sway you away? The other thing to consider is that this is a GMC Yukon XL Denali, which means it's an extra long vehicle. It's about 1.5 feet longer than my wife's Expedition. And all that really equates to is a little bit more leg room. They both have sliding adjustable back seats. Not much of a difference, honestly, but the biggest difference is the fact that the Yukon XL is about 1.5 feet longer in the back, so you get a lot more storage space in the back. Okay, so I got both lift gates up. Both third row seating is in the up position. You look back here in the Denali, it's simply huge. I mean, you probably have roughly 3.5 feet of space between the back of the seat here and the very back of the lift gate. So that is just, it's crazy. It's almost as much room as my wife's vehicle has with the seats folded down. Not quite as much, but similar. Now here's the third row up in a standard Expedition, not the EXT or the extended length Expedition, but the standard one. If we throw these two seats down, then you're gonna see that the space is a little bit deeper than that, but it's definitely more in line to the actual Yukon. So right here, it's probably 4 feet. So it's about 3.5 versus 4 feet right here. So you do get some more space if you have the seats in the folded down position here than you do in the Yukon. But again, you have a ton of space here. But by folding the third row flat on the Denali, check this out. First of all, they fold down really fast. Now you have, shoot, I'm gonna say 6 feet or more of space back here. It is insane how much space you have. And I'm gonna move quickly over to the Expedition just so you can kind of see the difference. It is significant. In terms of technology, you know, the technology is very similar between the two vehicles. They have all the normal safety features, you know, all your collision mitigation, lane keeping, you know, it's going to notify you if it feels like you're veering off, all of that stuff. They all have all the backup sensors, front sensors, they all have 360-degree cameras. The big difference is that you get much better resolution with the bigger, larger screen that you have in the Denali versus the Expedition. The Expedition feels a bit dated in terms of the camera system now, and that's hard to believe considering the fact that 360-degree cameras really haven't been around that long. But while we're back here, something worth noting is you have the ability with Ford to adjust the stopping position of your liftgate by holding the button down in the position that you want it. So if we want to drop it down a little bit, you would stop it and then you would hold the button down. You can hear a noise up front. You might not be able to hear it on camera, but now this is the height that the tailgate will actually stop at, or the liftgate will stop at. On the Denali, it's in one of really two settings besides the close setting. You have either 3/4 of the way up or all the way up, and we've set it for 3/4 of the way up so my wife can reach the button. And it positions it right about the position that I just programmed the Expedition at. I do like the fact that the Denali beeps louder when the gate's coming down, because on the Expedition, you have a little sensor down here that you can use to either raise or lower the lift gate. And if you're not careful, if you're doing something in the back here, you might unintentionally trigger it and cause the back lift gate to close on you, which has happened several times because you can barely hear the noise coming from up front. But yeah, that's one of the kind of the downfalls of this system that Ford's put in place, is that there's no way that I've found to shut that system off so you don't accidentally trigger it whenever you're, around the back, maybe loading or unloading something. That's typically when it happens. You're loading a big old thing of dog food in the back and your feet are right here and you're sliding it forward and you trigger the thing to close on you. And if you're not paying attention, this will actually close and it'll kind of hit you and it can hurt. Wheels and tires. This has a wider tire on a 22-inch wheel. This has a slightly narrower yet taller tire on a 22-inch wheel. They both have power deploying running boards on the side. You can see it right here, and then on the Denali. I will admit, these are a lot slower, and sometimes you want to crawl in and you end up putting your foot on it before it's completely deployed. Whereas on these, just like my truck, they come out quick enough that you can typically step on them without any issue at all. They both have the ability for you to lock and unlock the doors with the key fob in your pocket. GMC does it a little different. So the sensor isn't anywhere on the handle, it's right here on the edge of it. So that's what you would use to lock or unlock it, and you have to physically press the button. Where on Ford, you have a sensor right here that you can hold down to actually lock the vehicle up, and you can touch the inside of the handle to lock or unlock it as well. What I don't like about Ford is that, let's say you're in a car wash, whenever you're spraying your car down, the water can actually trigger this because it's touch sensitive. On GMC, it's a physical button. So you have to actually touch and press the button for it to work, and I like this better. I just think it's a much safer solution, so you don't have to worry about unintentionally, triggering your doors to lock and unlock all the time, especially if you're spraying it down at a car wash. And real quickly, back up at the front, they both have all LED lights, so it's really, really nice, high-intensity LED lights on both of them. Nice LED accent lighting around the actual headlights, and that's very similar on both. I personally think that the Expedition and the Yukon share a very elegant feel and look to them, but they do it in a little bit different way. I think the Expedition has more of kind of like a softer, more executive look to it, perhaps. Whereas the Denali, in my opinion, has more of like a chiseled professional look to it. I think the buyer of both vehicles is pretty similar, but the difference in terms of what you might like about the Denali is its edgier, more chiseled look versus the smoother lines that you get with the Expedition. More of a bulkier look versus an edgier look. But which one do you think looks better? I mean, leave a comment below. And if you like one, why do you like it? I really think the GMC overall has a more commanding presence on the road, to be honest. The Expedition, in my opinion, is the best looking Expedition that they've ever made, but it still has more of that softer, more conservative approach, whereas you definitely have more of an edgier approach to the Yukon. So keep in mind, this is my wife's vehicle. Took the liberty of trying to clean it up just a little bit. You have an 8-inch display. I believe it's like an 11.5-inch display on the Yukon, which we'll show you here in a second. But I don't want to focus too much on the technology in terms of display sizes and things like that. What I want to focus on here is the execution in terms of vertical versus horizontal layout. Now again, I know the 2022 Expedition has changed completely on the interior, all new interior. You actually have like I said, a 12-inch screen or a 15.5-inch screen. It basically takes up this whole area with the screen. The 12-inch screen is more horizontally laid out, whereas the 15.5-inch screen is more vertically. And the difference between the 15.5 versus 12 in function is pretty much all your controls are now on the screen if you get the 15.5. With the 12-inch screen, you still get your AC controls. You still get a lot of, buttons and knobs that you can still control, which I appreciate. So if my wife was looking for a new Expedition, she would probably want the one with the 12-inch screen, just considering the fact that she also likes actual buttons and knobs. She doesn't want to have to scroll through screens to get to simple functions. So just something to keep in mind. This vehicle has the trailer backup assist right here, which is pretty cool. Basically helps you back up a trailer by spinning the knob. We've never used it on this vehicle, but I'm sure it works fine. Again, if you look at the 2022, everything is moved to more of a horizontal view versus a vertical layout, and it gives you that perception of width that you don't get in this specific interior, which this interior is very similar to my truck. So the move with most vehicles is to give you that wider feel, and when we hop in the Denali, you're definitely going to see that. Shifting is entirely different between the two vehicles. We have a rotary shifter knob down here with your drive modes, and then your manual plus or minus for shifting in low gear, parking sensor, and this also has the self-parking feature where you can basically pull up either for parallel parking or standard parking and hit the button and it will steer the vehicle and park it for you. You have a 7-inch display in the middle of the gauge cluster here, whereas on the Denali the whole thing is actually an LCD display. This has the B&O sound system, which is really high-end sound system, but it's kind of a head-to-head competitor against the Bose system that's in the Denali. You've got some nice storage here on the side, wireless charging, USB right here, and then real wood here as well. So you have some really nice wood around here. There was a really shiny piece of chrome right here, and unfortunately what would happen is it would blind you, it would kind of glare in your eyes, so I covered it up with a piece of vinyl wrapping. And of course you do have push button start. And one big difference though is you get full massaging seats in a King Ranch or Platinum edition of the Expedition. So the front seats are full massaging. It actually feels like a shiatsu massage. They'll start kind of waving and pushing in different areas under your butt and on your back. And then in the back, a lot of differences. I'm not going to measure legroom per se because both of them have ample legroom space. There's not really a scenario, even if you're really tall, that you're going to be stressed out with the amount of legroom you have. You have your AC controls back here, plus you have a 110 150 watt jack. You have all your USB ports right here as well. You have all your vents across the top, very similar to the Denali. And this actually has a bench row in the center versus captain's chairs. The bench in the center seat can actually be removed so you can pass through. But most of these that you order are going to have the captain's chairs, very similar to the Denali. And then you just pull this lever and slide it up to gain entry into the third row, which is currently down, but there's still a lot of space back here. One of the big advantages that this model of Expedition has over the previous model of the Yukon and Tahoe is that there's no step up to get to the third row. Basically, there's not this hump in the floor that kind of make the back row a really, really bad position for anybody but real small kids to sit in. And that was one of the things we really liked about the Expedition. The new Denali, new Tahoes don't have that hump anymore, which is really cool. Let's move over to the Denali. So hopping in the Denali, you can see what I meant when I say horizontally laid out. Everything is really wide. Instantly, when you step inside of this and you look, it just looks like it's such a wider interior. It makes it feel more spacious as well. You can see that huge screen in here as well, plus the huge screen that makes up the main gauge cluster over here. All of your controls, this whole center stack, this layout is just so much more elegant looking than the Ford, just on a whole different level. This is what a lot of people would probably equate more to Cadillac versus, you know, a Chevy or a GMC product. This just looks absolutely gorgeous with all the wood tones, the stitching. There's no comparison. This is just a superior interior in terms of fit, finish, and layout versus the Ford. But again, we're comparing it to a 3-year-old Expedition and not the brand new one. It will definitely be more apples to apples to compare this against a 2022 model Expedition. However, when you look at technology and features, there's not a lot of technology and feature differences between these two vehicles. The shifting layout is certainly different. This has all your shifting buttons up here where you pull these out or you push the rest in. Air conditioning controls, radio controls, you have all of that up here so you can control your navigation system. You don't have any channel selection controls here. All of that's through the screen though. And I definitely would say that the Ford's interactive nature, basically the functionality of the screen, is a little bit simpler to understand. These newer systems are definitely becoming a bit more complicated in terms of how to navigate through them because they have so many features baked into them. Still have your pockets on the side, beautifully stitched seats, power seats all the way around as well. Let's move to the back. And here is your second row back here. You have these huge monitors in the headrests. You can also opt to get those in the Ford. We didn't get those because we couldn't find one that already had them installed. So we just got the one we got because it had the right color interior and the bench row, and we just installed our own screens in the back. This again has captain's chairs in it. They slide forward and backward, which is nice. You can go right through the center if you want to get to the third row, which is currently down. But very, very easy to move in and out of this vehicle. If you look here in the center, you also have charging ports via USB or HDMI, so you can actually plug in your media devices and watch them through the screen. And then up top, you can see you have a panoramic sunroof as well. Very, very nice. Overall interior of these two vehicles, it's hard to compare them. The lighter tones, the interiors being more of a cream color in the Expedition, definitely makes it look really nice, but the front dash, the center, all of that really feels dated compared to the Denali. This just looks like a whole different level of luxury compared to the interior of the Expedition. So it's going to be really interesting when I get my hands on a 2022 Expedition to give you more of that comparison. But even then, you'd really have to move up to something like a Lincoln Navigator to have this level of luxury inside. And I think that's what a lot of people would end up doing. They'd probably compare this more to a Lincoln Navigator versus a Ford Expedition, in my opinion. All right, so to wrap this video up, I haven't gone into too many technical details on either vehicles because I've already done a full interior-exterior review on this vehicle a couple days ago, and I've done a full review video on my wife's Expedition when we bought it. So definitely check those out if you want all the detailed specs in terms of horsepower, torque, and all that. And I believe that the horsepower torque of both of these are about the same, considering this has a 3.5 liter twin turbo V6 versus a 6.2 liter naturally aspirated V8. But absolutely beautiful vehicles, both of them. You know, the question for my wife is, does she want to upgrade to this? Does she want to move to a new Denali versus something like this? Is she happy enough with her vehicle? And she has a video that you should check out because she goes over all of that. The one big difference that really made her kind of shy away from the Denali is the fact that the hood itself, the profile line, and the dash feels like it really steps up a lot higher than the Expedition, and it's a little harder for her to see over because she's rather short in stature. Now, the other thing going in the Expedition's favor is the fact that the seat can also lift up much higher. So she can raise the seat significantly higher to look over the dash versus the Denali. The Denali, whenever she sits in the driver's seat, she still has a hard time seeing over the dash and over the hood. So that's just something to keep in mind. One thing I missed that the Denali has, technically, that the Expedition doesn't, it does have a heads-up display, which I can see right on the top of the dash there. Other than that, though, beautiful vehicles. What's your opinion? If you've had an opportunity to watch any content on the new 2022 Expedition, what's your opinion on that vehicle as well? They both have all those really cool features like radar cruise control and all the safety stuff like I mentioned earlier. But again, there are some pretty big differences between the two vehicles. But I'd love your feedback. Please leave a comment below. Anyways, I sure hope you've enjoyed this video. If you haven't had a chance, please take a moment, subscribe to my channel, give me a thumbs up, and we'll talk to you again very soon.